Pig farmers are hungry for business success, and they are prepared to do whatever it is that is ethical and necessary to achieve it. So I've spent the time to talk to you about that because I'm a great advocate for our model. With respect to providing industry services across the board, I'm not a great advocate for how representation works for many of the other parts of agriculture. Our model and some of the issues that we've had to deal with as an industry has meant that we have developed a special relationship with our pig producers, and that has given us great power to act in unity and in concert with each other and get some special things done. And when you have that, you are able to face up to many of the challenges that we have to face up to, and in the Australian pork industry there's plenty of those. For example, we are one of the few agricultural industries who has to compete in our own market with imports. And the volumes of imported pork coming into Australia today means that 45% of all of the pork consumed in Australia is produced on the other side of the world. Our consumers are also challenging to us. Focus group research that we undertake continually tells us that whilst most consumers are happy to eat meat, they don't actually want to know too much about how it got onto their plate, but they want to be absolutely secure in the knowledge that good and responsible people played the role in getting it on their plate. And it's our industry's responsibility to do exactly that. Animal activists also present challenges to our industry. They're largely motivated through a vegan philosophy. They don't want any exploitation of animals in any way, and by their very existence they challenge our industry and our existence. All this adds up to a lot of interest in what the pork industry gets up to, and the bottom line is that whether an individual consumes pork or not, they still want to know that our industry operates with good animal welfare, with a minimal negative environmental footprint, basically that we do the right thing. One of the differences that I perceive about our industry is that our history of intense competition through truly globally exposed markets has built an attitude that we have no God-given right to exist, and that's something we understand and we accept. And that has provided us with a competitive hunger that's become part of our industry's reputation. So as I said earlier, we've got a lot of challenges, and the way that we're meeting them is through constant change and adaptation. Firstly, relating to our people, our pig farmers. Our organisation, as I mentioned earlier, has worked very hard to develop open, honest and frank relationships with our pig farmers. And this has become an enormous industry asset, and it didn't come quickly, it didn't come easily. And to their great credit, our producers have made some big decisions and invested some personal and financial capital into adapting to change on their farms, and they know that they're going to have to continue to do that. So how have our pig farmers changed? Over the last 10 years, we've moved from growing pigs to producing food in the form of pork. And there's a subtle difference in the words that hides a major attitudinal shift with significant consequences on Australian pig farms. Our Australian cost base means that we are never going to be the world's lowest cost pig producer, and that's a fact that we accept. So our pork has to be worth the premium that people are paying for it. Our product integrity system is one way that we are able to achieve that, and this system includes three components, namely APIC, PigPass and PhysiTrace. APIC is our quality assurance system. It's got modules covering mandatory food safety verification, but also the bits around biosecurity, animal welfare, best management practice environment, etc. It's a very robust system. It's got annual independent audits. It stands up extremely well in comparison to other agricultural sector systems. And importantly, it covers 90% of every kilo of pork produced in Australia. And the individual retailers have jumped in, and they have their own modules within APIC to make it a more efficient system as well. PigPass is our pork version of the National Livestock Identification System. It tracks pig movements from farms to processors or wherever they're moving, when they move, how many are moving. When you scale up the information that we have as a result of the PigPass electronic tracking, it provides us with an enormous base of information and a huge capability to manage, for example, an emergency disease outbreak, which it's really designed to do. But it also gives us a compelling understanding of pig trading, right from the producer to producer or processor to processor level. PhysiTrace is our product traceback tool. So if you went to Coles or Woolworths and you bought a pork cutlet, you took it out of the packaging, you cut off a piece of the meat, you gave it to me, I send it off to a lab, and in 24 hours I can tell you which Australian pig farm that it came from. So that's technology we discovered here, we Australia, with the support of the pork industry. It's unique to Australia. There is no other pork industry in the world that are able to do that. So when you combine these various technologies and assets, it gives our industry enormous capability, particularly around the verification of product claims. For example, is this piece of pork Australian? Is it sow stall free? Is it free range? Did it come from the place that they claim that it came from? And it also, of course, the capability around managing disease and many other things. So the Australian pig farmer has evolved. He hasn't evolved away from his farm, but he's definitely evolved more in a direction and closeness towards meeting the needs of the consumer. What's changed for our pigs? In 2010, our producers decided to invest somewhere around $50 million in making changes on their farms to the way to take away sow stalls. Sow stalls are very small individual pens for sows that a lot of people did not like, thinking that their pork came from those types of systems. And we put those sows into what we call loose housing, and this is the alternative to the use of sow stalls. So Australian pigs now lead the world in terms of how we have voluntarily decided to house them. And that's thanks to millions of dollars we've spent in research and development on actually how do you house sows the best way for their own welfare. So today more than 70% of Australian pregnant sows are spending the vast majority, over 90% of their pregnancy, in this loose housing system, and we're aiming for the whole industry to be there within the next couple of years. And we receive something like $10 million worth of pork imports every week into Australia. And it's worth noting that none of the countries from where those pork imports come, except for one exception, which is the Netherlands, and it accounts for a very small proportion, all of those countries still use sow stalls. So there is a difference with Australian pork. How has our pork changed? Well, we know more today about what makes a great eating experience than we've ever known in the past. We also know how to replicate that experience consistently. We know how to build a platform to underpin that experience on our pig farms. Our Eating Quality Pathways projects have identified the key inputs to a more enjoyable pork experience, and ultimately we plan to have these conditions built in to our quality assurance system as part of a separate module. We've also discovered, perhaps not surprisingly, that the greatest influence on eating quality actually happens in the kitchen of the consumer. So when it comes to consumers, what's changed in our relationship with the consumer? The past 5 years has seen us jump back on the Get Some Pork on Your Fork campaign. It's had TV and radio elements. It's been a very consistent, single-minded messaging that has cut through, and it's enabled us to engage with consumers in a way that's developed a more distinctive image for pork, a higher awareness of it as a centre-of-plate alternative, and emphasising some of the health attributes such as low in fat and a valuable source of iron. Some of you might have seen our cheeky Pork Tim advertising campaign. That successfully increased the recognition of pork as a real option. It's an interesting aside how a supposedly conservative farming organisation can develop and implement an advertising campaign for a commodity built around the creative concept of porking someone. But that's a story for another day. I just want to let you know it didn't happen lightly. There was a hell of a lot of discussion over whether we do that or not. So I've talked a lot about change with respect to people, pigs and pork. Where does that take us? I've chosen the fourth P word as pride, because too often in my industry we've become defensive, evasive, even apologetic about what we do, and it shouldn't have to be that way. We need to be able to turn this around and look back at our farm operations and our industry with pride. We need to be comfortable with anyone choosing to come off the street, off the road, and take a look at our world. Consumers stopping to come onto a pig farm unannounced and being satisfied or even really impressed with what it is that they're seeing. And so our pride is reflected in how we aspire to be a more transparent industry, one that's not afraid of others seeing what we do. In fact, we're proud. We should be proud to show it off to those people who care to take a look. We've come some way in this, but to be frank, we actually have a significant way still to go. It's a two-way street. We need to get consumers to understand what we do. We also need to get farmers to understand what consumers expect. But this is an area that we see both as a huge threat for our industry if we get it wrong, or a great opportunity if we do it right. And it doesn't matter how profitable our industry is, it isn't sustainable until the community accepts that we deserve a place within it. So are the changes that we're making as an industry leading to us meeting the challenges we're facing? What is the actual health of the Australian pork industry? Let's consider a few numbers. Since 2010, fresh pork consumption in volume terms has increased by 15% per capita. So considering the habitual nature of meat preferences, that's a pretty good outcome. And remember, price has actually moved a lot in that time as well. The number is still growing. It's growing very quickly at present. There's some reasons for that. Also, since 2010, the average pig farm gate price has increased by 26%, and that's been reflected right through to the supermarket shelf as well. In more recent times, clearly, we have the serendipity of a shortage of beef, and that is absolutely having an impact, but it's really only exacerbating what has been a longer-term trend. So these demand increases have been realised through a combination of higher prices, higher consumption, and our industry value has increased by 39% since 2010. And with that has come some well-earned profitability for our producers as well. So what's next for the pork industry? Looking to our north, China is a nation that produces and consumes around half of all the world's pork. They've got a huge and growing middle class. They're looking for higher protein consumption year by year, and pork is their protein of choice. Their pork industry is, however, in a major transition period, moving from backyard production to modern intensive methods, and that's affecting the stability of their volumes. They also have concerns around their food safety systems across the board for pork as well as for a lot of other food commodities. Australia, under this scenario, offers some very attractive options. We've got a modern pork industry with some of the leading edge product integrity tools available globally. We've got a second-to-none food safety record and reputation. And our consumer research indicates that Chinese attitudes to food production in Australia is extremely complementary. But it's not going to be easy for our industry. China today does not trade with pork with Australia. We have no trade protocols negotiated. They tend to be a very political exercise to get undertaken. So it should not be underestimated as to how difficult this is going to be for the future. But it is our aspiration and we are working on it. So that's a bit of the pork industry story. Our industry has made some big investments in change. We're going to continue to do so because we have to remain competitive. We're a different industry to what we were 5 years ago, and we're going to be a different industry in another 5 years. And addressing challenges for us is a journey, not a destination, and we're going to have to keep very, very busy to keep it up. Thanks for your attention, and I'd be very happy to take any questions.